Conan the Barbarian came out in 1982 and made $130 million. Roger Corman looked at it and said, "I can make that for $200 and twice the nudity." He was right, and somehow a few of these shameless ripoffs are genuinely worth your time. Roger Corman wanted to get something out fast to ride the Conan wave, so he hired Jack Hill to direct Sorceress. Now, Jack Hill wasn't some nobody. He was a genuinely respected exploitation filmmaker, the guy behind cult classics like Coffee and Switchblade Sisters. He took the job, made his movie, and delivered his cut. Then Corman got hold of it. Corman thought it needed more nudity. He ordered additional scenes shot. The two leads here were Lee and Lynette Harris, who were Playboy playmates. But even they were uncomfortable with extensive nudity, so body doubles were brought in. Corman also thought the pacing was too slow, so he brought in editors and cut the whole thing down to 83 minutes. Hill watched what came out the other end and wanted nothing to do with it. He took his name off the director credit entirely and put a pseudonym on it instead. He kept his producer credit, but disowned the film. Sorceress ended up being the last movie Jack Hill ever directed. The movie itself is about twin daughters of an evil sorcerer who wants them dead because a prophecy says one of them will overthrow him. They get saved as babies and raised in secret. Raised as boys, actually, which means they grow up having no idea they're women. When the sorcerer eventually captures one of them for a human sacrifice, the other has to go rescue her. The Harris twins genuinely cannot act. At all. But the movie is so relentlessly entertaining that it almost doesn't matter. A year later came Hundra, and this one's genuinely interesting for a different reason. The setup is straightforward. Lorene Landon plays a warrior woman whose Amazon tribe gets wiped out by Vikings, and she goes on a revenge rampage. What's not standard is that somehow Matt Cimber managed to get Ennio Morricone to score it. Nobody quite knows how that happened, but it did, and the score is genuinely great, probably the best thing in the movie. Cimber had this interesting career. He made blaxploitation films in the 70s, and he did The Witch Who Came from the Sea. He pitched Hundra as a feminist barbarian film, a story about a woman who refuses to be dominated by men. And it starts out that way, but pretty quickly it becomes clear that the feminist angle is mostly decoration. Landon is impressive. She did almost all her own stunts, but the camera spends a lot of time on her and the other women in ways that have nothing to do with feminism. Landon herself tells this great story about the nude scene. She'd refused to do it, so they filmed it with a body double while she wasn't there. When she saw the footage in the editing room, she looked at the screen and said, "That's not me. My ass isn't that big." And she went back and did the scene herself. And then there's Barbarian Queen, which is the most notorious here. Lana Clarkson plays Amathea, a barbarian queen whose village gets attacked on her wedding day. Her fiancé gets captured, her sister gets assaulted, and she leads a group of surviving warrior women to take on the empire responsible. The marketing sold it as a female Conan. Clarkson was 6 feet tall and genuinely imposing, and the posters made her look like someone you absolutely did not want to mess with. The actual movie is something else. It runs 70 minutes, and a significant chunk of those 70 minutes is sexual violence and degradation. Within the first 10 minutes, there's a graphic scene. Clarkson's character gets captured and goes through an extended torture sequence. This is an extremely hard R, but Clarkson commits completely to every second of it, and when she does get to fight back, the movie absolutely earns it. Thor the Conqueror came out in 1983, and it is an absolute catastrophe. Bad dubbing, no real plot, sweaty men grunting at each other in misty forests. The story is about a guy whose parents got killed when he was a baby, and he grows up to get revenge. Standard stuff, except that part doesn't actually become relevant until the last 5 minutes of the movie. Everything before that is just Thor splashing around in the surf, rolling around with a busty warrior woman, and occasionally fighting people. Thor has this sorcerer looking out for him, a guy who can turn himself into an owl. He decided to take Thor under his wing after his father died. His role throughout the film is basically to spy on Thor's romantic encounters from owl form and then occasionally swoop in to offer completely useless advice. Going into Thor the Conqueror knowing it's supposed to be bad doesn't fully prepare you for how bad it actually is. But that's also kind of the point. There's something genuinely entertaining about a movie this committed to being this terrible. Fred Olen Ray made a movie called Bikini Frankenstein. He also made a movie called Dinosaur Island, and roughly 150 others just like them. The man is a machine of low-budget exploitation cinema, and in 1991 he decided to make a sword and sorcery film. His reason was very Fred Olen Ray. He heard that the sets from Roger Corman's Wizard of the Lost Kingdom were still standing and figured, hey, free sets. Sword and sorcery movie, let's go. Wizards of the Demon Sword is about a swordsman helping a young woman track down something called the Knife of Actar, which gives its owner unlimited power. She needs it to free her imprisoned father. An evil wizard wants it for his own reasons. They race each other to get there first. It actually kind of works. The story is coherent, which for this genre is genuinely rare. The plot threads connect, everything gets explained, there aren't giant holes in the logic. It's still very much a bargain bin sword and sorcery movie. The budget is obvious in every frame, but within those limits it delivers exactly what it promises. Two sisters, two magic swords, one kingdom up for grabs. Eyes of the Serpent came out in 1992, and the easiest way to describe it is this. Imagine a below-average episode of Xena, but with nudity. That's the whole movie. There's two princesses on opposite sides of a war and a lone swordsman who shows up to help the good one. It's not particularly well acted. The dialogue is stupid and the direction is forgettable, but the sword fights at least end with actual blood on the blades, which is more than a lot of these movies bother with. It's mindless, it's harmless, and occasionally it's unintentionally funny in ways that keep you from falling asleep. It came out on VHS in two versions. An R-rated cut and an unrated cut, the difference being about 60 extra seconds of a sex scene. The DVD release in 1997 went with the R-rated version. Most directors making Conan knockoffs in the early 80s weren't exactly swinging for the fences. Albert Pune was different. He actually had something in mind. He spent years shopping the sword and the sorcerer around Hollywood. Not just with a script either, he put together a full pitch package with props and storyboards. He was trying to convince someone this could be a real film, not just another cheap cash-in. At one point, he got so desperate he snuck the script into Charlton Heston's dressing room while the actor was doing a play. He eventually got it made, and the movie shows that effort. For a Conan knockoff, it's genuinely good. There's actual budget, decent acting, even some real tension. The plot is pretty standard here. A medieval prince rescues a damsel and avenges his slain family with a triple-edged sword. But it did well enough at the box office, made $39 million in 1982, which for this kind of film was a serious number. If The Sword and the Sorcerer was made by a director who actually cared, Deathstalker was made by a producer who absolutely did not. Roger Corman was very clear about what he wanted. He wanted a film for, in his words, horny adolescent males. He wanted blood and nudity, delivered without unnecessary distractions like character development. He wasn't trying to make art. He was trying to make money. They shot it in Argentina on almost no budget. The film's plot is basically just connective tissue between the grindhouse stuff. Warrior gets 3 magical objects, defeats evil sorcerer, rescues princess, everyone gets their clothes off. To make sure the sex appeal was covered, Corman cast 2 Playboy playmates in the lead female roles. Barbie Benton as the princess, Lana Clarkson as the warrior woman Kyra. And when the early cut came in and Corman decided it wasn't titillating enough, they just filmed more nude scenes. It worked. The movie became a late-night cable staple and got 3 sequels. By 1990, the Conan wave was long over. Everyone who was going to make a barbarian movie had already made it. The genre had been strip-mined. And then somebody made Time Barbarians. A medieval warrior chases a bad guy through time to modern-day Los Angeles to avenge his wife's death. That's the movie. The budget was almost nothing. The costumes look like something from a role-playing event, and the cultists running around the woods are clearly just guys they rounded up and told to hoot and yell. But the thing about Time Barbarians is that it has this total commitment to itself. The fantasy dialogue is delivered completely straight. The warrior king wanders around Los Angeles in a loincloth like it's the most natural thing in the world. There are sword fights in the woods with guys who crouch and snarl. Nobody involved seems embarrassed by any of it. This is one of the most brazenly dishonest movies ever made. Roger Corman was producing a low-budget fantasy film starring David Carradine. The movie was set on a desert planet where Carradine plays a wandering swordsman who arrives in a small town. The town is controlled by two rival warlords fighting over the only water source. He plays both sides against each other, offers his services to one, then the other. If this sounds exactly like Yojimbo and a fistful of dollars, that's because it is. Kurosawa, of course, went uncredited. The original title was Kane of Dark Planet. Corman changed it to The Warrior and the Sorceress. There is no sorceress in this movie. There is one character who does a tiny bit of magic. That's it. When someone asked Corman about this, he was completely unapologetic. He said the whole point of a title is to get people into seats, and once they've paid and sat down, it doesn't matter what's in the film or not. And if you're wondering what kind of movie this actually is, the answer is the one with a four-breasted exotic dancer. There's a tavern scene with a performer who has four breasts, which was Corman's very deliberate attempt to outdo the cantina scene from Star Wars. That tells you everything about the creative ambitions here. Now this one has an actual story behind it, and it's kind of a sad one. Lucio Fulci was one of the great Italian horror directors. He made Zombie, The Beyond, Gates of Hell. By the early 80s, he'd built a real reputation in horror, and he wanted to break out of it. Conquest was supposed to be his shot at a bigger market, a proper fantasy epic. He parted ways with his longtime writing partner Dardano Sacchetti to do it. Sacchetti felt completely betrayed by this and sued him. A collaboration that had produced some of the best Italian horror ended permanently and bitterly over this movie. Then the budget came in way lower than Fulci expected. He was stuck making a bargain fantasy film when he'd imagined something grander. The movie flopped. So Fulci burned the bridge with his best collaborator, made himself miserable, and got nothing for it. The actual film is completely unhinged in the best possible way. It feels less like a fantasy adventure and more like a fever dream. There's constant fog, almost no dialogue, and the violence is absolutely relentless. Within the first few minutes, werewolf creatures tear a woman apart on screen. The villain is a sorceress who wears nothing but a metal skull mask. And in the most audacious move, the film kills its own hero halfway through the movie and just keeps going. This Italian production makes no attempt whatsoever to hide what it is. The hero is a barbarian prince whose village gets massacred by the forces of an evil fire goddess. He goes on a revenge quest. He gets crucified at one point. He fights blind cavemen and tree men. There's a mystical arc in a temple. Every single sword and sorcery cliché you can think of is in this movie. The guy playing the lead was a former Mr. Universe contestant who'd been working as a stuntman, not an actor. You can see it clearly in every scene he's in. And yet the movie just charges forward with this completely unself-conscious B-movie energy. It's cheap, it's lurid, it hits every beat you've seen before, and it does not care. It's dumb fun, and it knows it. This one follows an Amazonian warrior on a quest to retrieve a magic sword and defeat a sorcerer king. The gimmick is that nearly all the fighters are women. Roger Corman later described Amazons as his Xena warrior princess, his proto-feminist warrior fantasy that predated the whole genre. In reality, the Amazons spend most of the film fighting in leather bikinis while the camera pays close attention to everything the costumes don't cover. At one point, the main character gets captured, tied up, and nearly sacrificed topless to a carnivorous tree. Amazons is actually one of the more watchable films in Corman's whole cheapo fantasy catalog. The script was based on a short story by actual fantasy author Charles Saunders, which gives it just enough story backbone to hold together. Compared to most of what Corman was churning out in Argentina in the mid-80s, this one has something resembling a plot. If you're going to watch one leather bikini Amazonian fantasy from 1986, this is probably your best option.